Thank you, Leroy. Nice to be back here. So what we're going to be doing, we've already done the opening. I'm going to present what your master plan study committee has come up with in the way of a first step and directions for providing facilities for the far future on this site. And then Fred and Leroy will both talk about feasibility and next steps. We will then open it up for discussion and then send you on your way. So the very nature of a master plan is to provide an understanding of how you might fit all of your long-term needs on an existing property. And the first phase part of that plan is our best understanding of how first steps might lead you toward that future on this site. Everything right now is very conceptual, so it can change. A lot of that depends on resources available for the congregation. When we looked at all of the needs, and I'm just going to touch on these briefly due to time, but we identified a number of areas. So a number of needs in your existing worship space, including the need for overflow seating and some opportunity to create more seats that can participate in worship. We looked at the provisions for hospitality, how you greet people, how toilet rooms function, how you deal with worship overflow, and how you serve refreshments without having to leave the worship building. We also looked at worship support spaces and projected at some point the need for a future worship on the site. We looked at expansion of offices and educational spaces, the needs of fellowship and dining for your parish, some of the special ministries surrounding the preschool program and the religious education, as well as the festival. Storage and maintenance. Never had a church that said we have enough storage. We looked at things relative to the site. So short-term parking and circulation, future parking in the event that at some point you have a larger worship space that can hold substantially more people. And then we also looked at how your site might be able to facilitate a school at any point in the future and make sure that we weren't closing that door off for the parish. Some of the priorities then we understood as being a necessary first step for that future master plan, dealing primarily with worship and hospitality as well as worship support, and also facilitating the additional parking needs. And I'll explain a little bit more about that when we look at how the parking is situated. So this is your site, a part of it. You actually have 20 acres, so it's a lot larger than this. But I'm going to focus first, rather than on the overall site, on this area of the site, because that's really the area that is more concerned with how the first phases of the plan lay out. So first of all, we had to think about where a future worship could be located in a way that would use the existing worship building and any spaces we add to that building. Am I in the way of some of you? I can step back further. I'm going to do that. We looked at first phase parking and also future parking needs, not only for the first phases of the building that will be here, the parish center and the worship and gathering areas, but also parking that would be convenient and adequate for that future layout of a new worship space. In laying out substantially more parking farther south in the site, it changes how you approach entry into the building. Your existing entry now faces north and addresses the street. We are still maintaining presence and entry that can come off of the street. But as you grow more parking farther south, you'll have to think about how wheelchair access spaces and the additional parking finds a convenient route into the building. The first Sunday that I worshiped here, I sat in the far west corner of your worship, and it did not go unnoticed to me that a great number of you enter through that parking, or through that doorway on that corner of worship already. And we have laid out, which I'll show you in a minute, new gathering spaces that wrap around the existing worship in order to be able to provide both overflow for worship and hospitality and meeting spaces that the church can use on Sunday mornings and during the week. We also envisioned as a committee the potential future additions that could be added, although it's not part of first phase, to the parish center to improve office spaces and religious education spaces and fellowship and the various activities that happen here. All of those spaces then, we laid out on the overall site and identified the probable size of a two-track, that is two classes per grade school, which generally our firm does a lot of religious day schools, and we envision that that would very likely be about 54,000 square feet. You currently, in the area that's shown in green here, you currently have a soccer field on fairly level ground with good connection to the street, and what would be good connection then to future parking, leaving the lower areas of the site that have a lot of drainage and water related issues, free for play fields and other activities that buildings, of course, are very sensitive to water. Interestingly enough, if you want to know the approximate size of the school, 54,000 square feet is the size of a regulation play soccer field, which is currently in that location. Schools don't generally lay out as nicely as a rectangular box, but it gets us, as a one-level school with no multiple floors, an idea of the size. And of course, you may very well build that in the future with multiple levels, but it gives you an idea of the square footage of the site and the amount of land that you would then have available for a future school. And this is what that looks like for the proposed master plan. So we have your existing worship. We have wrapped then hospitality and meeting space, things that would be conducive for adult religious education, gathering before and after worship, overflow seating, better toilet room facilities around the front of the existing worship, extending all the way over to the side so that an entry at this location could then address, with a canopy and a tower, the expanded parking on the site. You can see we have left room for a future worship. We actually have calculated all those spaces necessary to seat in the magnitude of 1,000 people or more. Part of the reason for doing that now isn't to focus on that area of the site or that design. It is to ensure that whatever you do on the site has enough room to be able to accommodate that worship. And then you can see we've also shown potential areas that would be able to house additional program to the parish center. The first phase then really is just that addition onto the existing worship, and this is the amount of additional parking that would be provided beyond the existing lots. Now, having said that, a little bit of this lot changes because of this portion of addition, entry, canopy, and drive-through. All of the handicap parking stalls are conveniently located close to that covered entry. And the bulk of the new parking then is convenient to get to worship and also convenient to get to parish center. Right now, the total stalls on the site are right around 200. And this is how that floor plan lays out, and I'll walk you through it very briefly. So we have at the far southwest corner the drop-off canopy, the tower, and the new entry. Next to that, an adequate place for gathering. Not that your existing gathering space is undersized. We've located convenient to that new restrooms with much more generous fixtures than you currently have. And then still an entry that people coming from the parish center can easily get into the building, and or people choosing to still park on the street will still be able to get into the building. On access with the new worship, a meeting and fellowship area, and two other meeting spaces, and all of these spaces together can open up into one large meeting space. This can be used as well as the gathering for overflow seating. We've included a parenting area. And one of the advantages of this corridor wrapping around the building is that it allows us the ability to add overflow seating to assist with the large numbers of people attending worship for large worship events. The thought is that there would be a glass wall wrapping all the way around the worship so that additional seating can be set up to increase the number of seating by about 130 to 150, depending on how you set them up. Some of those may set up in the back row, the ambulatory of the existing worship. Some of them would be out in that space beyond worship. We've not yet discussed exactly how those glass walls might potentially be able to open up directly. That's part of future discussion. But that would be a goal, to be able to incorporate more people into worship when you need a worship space that is larger than your existing. This is what that looks like, kind of in an aerial shot. The existing worship, a gable extension off of that worship over the gathering space, another gable off of the worship coming along the main axis and the main doors into worship, stretching out towards the street. And then the canopy and tower at the new entry point for your facility. It provides good entry to all areas where you have existing buildings or new parking or existing parking, and to the street as well. And the gable and meeting spaces have good presence to the street. That's very important for a church, to not feel like you've turned your back on the neighborhood, even as the entry locates to address the larger needs of parking on the site. And then we have some images of what that looks like conceptually. So this is looking from the street. Parish Center is over here. You can see the existing stalls that lead immediately into the Parish Center. The canopy in the front of the church is then replaced with that meeting, fellowship, and entry area here. The toilet rooms are here. The gathering space over here looking out into the parking, and then tower and canopy and new entry, making it convenient for all of the larger parking areas. Looking at that from another direction, this is from the parking lot. You can see the drop-off, the canopy and tower, the entry, gathering, and meeting space, along with your existing worship in the parish house, rectory, and the parish center in the background. And just a little closer image of that. This is the perspective of that large fellowship area looking out onto the street. A large amount of glass. It's a little hard to see here, but symbol either in the glass or behind the glass. Right now what we're showing is a cross with some stained glass that's interior to the building, so it's easier to maintain and service, but fully visible to the outside. This is an area that many churches, when they have it, keep a small amount of lights on during the evening hours up until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, when people are traveling on the street to their residences. This is the gathering area, looking in a little more closer detail. You can see we have made provisions to remove and relocate existing art glass. So if that back wall of worship turns into a movable glass wall to accommodate better visibility for overflow and for gathering into the worship, we are not intending to discard some of the sacred symbols of the church. So relocating art glass. We've shown a fireplace, not that it's ever cold in Wisconsin, but we've shown a fireplace as a part of the hospitality. Those sorts of things are always optional. I've had many churches say, nope, sorry, we're not going to do it. It's still Wisconsin. It's nice to walk into a space and have refreshments and symbols of warmth and hospitality. And then looking directly from the parish center, and you can see the new fellowship meeting space, the entry, restrooms, gathering, tower, and canopy with the existing worship beyond. One of the challenges of your building and its design is figuring out how to add space onto it that has integrity to respect your sacred place of worship and still provide the visibility and the openness that people seeing your church will see as invitational and welcoming, even though the main entry is buried a little further into the site. So just a little bit about the plans that the committee has laid out for potential phasing of the master plan. First step is the addition onto the worship building, parking and site infrastructure. A potential second step is work as needed on the parish center, offices or religious education. One of the things that the first phase of the plan assists the parish with is in providing potential meeting spaces, whether that's those fellowship and meeting spaces that can be 3 separate spaces or all one space, or whether that's the gathering area. It provides more opportunity for adult education and meetings so that rooms that are used for that purpose here can potentially relocate over to that building, which then helps your religious education program thrive in this building. Another step might be the future worship and expanded parking when the time is ready for that step. And then a final step at any point would be contemplating the new school on the site. So just a little bit in the way of project data. Your existing site is 20 acres. Your existing parking is 129 stalls, including 11 handicap stalls. Your existing parish center is about 17,000 square feet. Your existing worship center is about 8,000 square feet, and the existing worship seating at 20 inches per person. Bigger than airline seats. I don't easily fit into 20 inches, but I can. One of the reasons that we set worship counts up with 20 inches per seat is because that's the size of a standard pew chair. So whether you have chairs or pews, it's really easy to count more that way. But counting up your existing pews at 20 inches would be 444 people. The phase 1 parking increases the parking count to 200 stalls, including 13 handicap spaces. It adds the gathering addition to the worship building at about 11,500, including mechanical space that right now we have designed into the building underneath the addition. And then in the way of worship overflow, as I said, it adds the potential for 130 plus or minus stalls, which is a 30% increase in that seating count of 444. We have been working with NCI Roberts to give us a projection, a conceptual idea of what the potential cost of that first phase might be, and it is roughly in between a range of $4.5 to $5 million. That phase 1 cost includes the construction costs associated with the site and the building, the projection of cost for worship code updates. Let me say a little bit about that. Your worship building was built in a completely different type of code. In order to add on to it, there are some provisions of the code that we have to address just purely from a code standpoint. Primarily, sprinkler system and fire alarm system. And so we've included that in the cost for the first phase. We also have projected allowances for a variety of different things that could be done to your existing worship in order to help you better function in that space for the immediate future until you have a larger and bigger worship space available. And we've also included the cost for the tower and the canopy. Included also in those costs are all of the things that are not brick and mortar or not physical building. So architectural and consulting fees, construction contingencies, owner contingencies, those are monies that we hold on behalf of, you hold on behalf of the parish. So in the event there are unforeseeable things happening with the construction, we are able to address them without having to ask for more money or do additional fundraising. We've included direct purchase tax savings and then some owner, what are called soft costs. Those are costs associated with building. Things like printing costs and permit fees and things like that we know the church is going to encounter in the course of a building project. And all of that then is roughly in that range of $4.5 to $5 million. So that is the proposed master plan and the first phases that your committee believes will be a good step toward being able to provide the future needs of this parish. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to first Fred from James Company, who's going to speak a little bit about feasibility, and then back to Leroy, who's going to give you some idea of what we envision might be a very, very rough schedule for our next steps.